Sandra, I understand you don't want to go there because he will be there with his new partner, but you can't keep avoiding him forever, Angie said. You live in the same city and share mutual friends, so it's impossible to completely avoid him. You're only causing more stress for yourself by trying to wall yourself off from everything. I know it's hard for you to visit places where you used to be happy with him, but life goes on. If you keep rejecting invitations from your mutual friends, they may eventually stop inviting you altogether. Did Dylan and Dorothy speak with you? No, they didn't. It's just my assumption. You've isolated yourself from others. Perhaps it's time to explore your surroundings. Life continues beyond Gareth Forster. Dylan is hosting an amazing party with a cover band and many attendees. You might even meet someone there. Are you going to miss out because of that unpleasant person, Gareth? All right, Sandra, we can discuss it later. No, let's go now, my love. We'll go together. Don't avoid Gareth. It won't be easy, but the first encounter is always the most difficult. It gets easier from there. Angie's life had transformed into a rapid routine of going from point A to point B since Gareth's announcement of their breakup. She abandoned her beloved rumba and stopped socializing. Even taking a simple walk had become a daunting task. Everywhere she went, Gareth's presence loomed over her like a menacing shadow. The city had become a perilous zone, each place evoking memories of her past happiness. Upon discovering that he had a new girlfriend, Angie ceased hanging out with their mutual friends. She only met with girlfriends occasionally, usually for coffee during the day, and quickly retreated to the peaceful silence of her parents' cabin in the countryside. Angie had returned to her parents' home, as the solitude of her apartment had become intolerable. She was unsure of what to do with the space. Although it had remained unoccupied for a year, she had not yet decided whether to move back in or rent it out. She felt like a vulnerable child again, relying on her parents for everything. While her mother was overjoyed to have her daughter living with them again, she was deeply concerned about Angie's ongoing depression and uncertain how to help. As a result, she and Sandra, Angie's closest friend, developed a plan of action. Sandra recognized that Angie's inevitable encounter with Gareth would be painful, but believed that it was the key to helping her friend move forward and leave the past behind. Angie nervously fidgeted with her napkin and scanned her surroundings. Sandra was nowhere to be found, while Dylan and Dorothy were engrossed with a never-ending procession of guests. Maybe Gareth wouldn't show up after all, which would be a relief. Alternatively, they could try to sneak out unnoticed amidst the bustling crowd. Then, Angie caught sight of him. Gareth and his new girlfriend entered, hand in hand, beaming radiantly. Of course they did. She was stunningly beautiful, stylish, and sophisticated. Angie's eyes discreetly drifted to the mirror. Yes, it was a pitiful comparison. Her shoulder-length hair was always disheveled, and her pale face bore several prominent wrinkles. Her painfully thin frame didn't do her any favors either. Angie had spent a considerable amount of time searching for the perfect dress, only to become so frustrated that she opted for the pantsuit she had purchased last year. She disliked everything she tried on, and most of all, she disliked herself. Her once prideful eyes were now dull and lacked their characteristic sparkle, and she felt that it was impossible to regain it. Angie had dutifully followed Sandra's instructions before arriving at the party. She had visited the salon to have her hair and makeup professionally done. However, despite her efforts, the reflection in the mirror still failed to satisfy her. And now, there was this stunning beauty who seemed to have stepped out of a fashion magazine. Where do such people come from, looking so immaculate? Gareth appeared to be staring in her direction, which was unsurprising. He and his new flame were now heading her way. However, Sandra was nowhere to be seen. Hadn't she promised to remain by her side at all times and never leave her alone? As Angie continued to stare at her ex and his new partner, a guy approached her and spoke for no apparent reason. "Hello," he said. "Hello," Angie responded automatically without looking at him, her attention still fixed on Gareth and his companion. "Are those your friends?" the guy asked. Angie snapped out of her trance and looked at him. She noticed that he had curly hair, but she didn't really care about him. What did he want? "Dorothy and Dylan, yes. Friends," she said absent-mindedly before turning away again. "No, I mean the couple you're looking at," the guy clarified. Angie was terribly embarrassed that her staring was so obvious. She lowered her gaze and went back to fiddling with her napkin. "Well, yeah, you were just staring. I'm sorry," the guy said. "Oh, I see. Yes, it's been a while since we broke up, but it still hurts," Angie replied. "Yeah, I know how that feels. But you know what helped me? A change of scenery. I moved to a new city, got a new job, met new people. It was hard at first, but it really helped me move on," the guy said with a reassuring smile. "That's a good idea. Maybe I should consider it too," Angie replied, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in a while. "Definitely. And if you ever need someone to talk to or just hang out with, don't hesitate to give me a call," the guy said, handing her his business card. Angie smiled gratefully and put the card in her purse. Maybe this chance encounter was a sign that it was time for her to take control of her life and move forward. "Thanks, that's kind of you to say. But I don't think she's a doll. She's actually quite beautiful and seems nice." "Oh, I'm not saying she's not beautiful or nice, but it's just, well, you know what I mean. It's hard to see your ex move on with someone new, especially when you're still struggling with the breakup. But hey, it gets better with time. Trust me on that." Angie managed a small smile. "Thanks. I hope you're right." "Of course I'm right. I'm always right," he said with a grin. Angie chuckled and shook her head. "Modest too, I see." They both laughed, and for a moment, Angie forgot about her ex and his new girlfriend. Maybe tonight wasn't such a disaster after all. She's gorgeous. Isn't that the kind of woman you men dream of? Maybe some do, but I dream of a real one. A real one, you know? I think everyone dreams of the perfect one. You shouldn't think so. God, they all look alike. They're just clones. You're just trying to make me feel better. I don't know why. We don't even know each other's names. That's simple. I'm even Bosworth, and I'm not just trying to make you feel better. I am. I genuinely dislike the modern girl's preoccupation with her appearance. There should be a balance, but there isn't one nowadays," he said. "I'm Angie Faber," she responded, and her heart skipped a beat as she heard the velvety, all too familiar voice close to her. "Angie, it's nice to see you." "Very nice," he said. Angie rose to her feet unsteadily, and to her surprise, Gareth wrapped his arms around her in a hug. Her legs turned to jelly, and she stumbled backward, extricating herself from his embrace. Evan, seated beside her, acted without hesitation and supported her by placing a hand lightly on her waist. Gareth looked at Evan expectantly, waiting for an introduction. Angie felt like she was about to break down as she struggled to hold back tears. Her hands were trembling, and she felt a faint shake in her body. Evan noticed and placed his hands on her shoulders, offering a reassuring smile. "I am Evan," he said calmly, "and this is my Angie." Angie raised her eyebrows in surprise at his possessive remark, but said nothing. It was unexpected, to say the least. Angie took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. She forced a smile and replied, "Yes, I'm doing well, thank you." She glanced at Evan, who still had his hands on her shoulders, and then back at Gareth. "Congratulations on your engagement," she added, trying to sound genuine. Gareth's smile faltered slightly, and Angie couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. She wasn't sure why she felt that way, considering how much she had loved him once. Perhaps it was because he had moved on so quickly, without any apparent hesitation or regret. "Thank you," Gareth replied, glancing at Alicia. "I'm really happy with Alicia. She's amazing." Angie nodded, still smiling. "I'm glad to hear that." She looked at Evan again, and he gave her a reassuring squeeze on her shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot to her. Well, we should get going, Gareth said, glancing at his watch. It was nice seeing you, Angie. Nice seeing you too, Gareth, Angie replied, mustering up one last smile. She watched as he and Alicia walked away, hand in hand, and felt a twinge of sadness. But at the same time, she felt a sense of relief. She was ready to move on, with or without someone by her side. That phrase was a real eye-opener, Angie thought to herself. Gareth seemed to know how much she was hurting and sympathized with her. She wanted to respond, but Avon spoke up first. We're doing great. There's nothing to worry about. I'm lucky. Angie is a treasure, Evan said, giving her waist a reassuring squeeze. Gareth coughed suddenly, as if he had choked on something. Yeah, she is, he managed to say. Well, I think we'll go find something refreshing. It's hot, right, honey? Evan asked Angie. Yes, Angie replied, relieved to have an excuse to leave the awkward situation. Avon lifted her up by the waist, and Gareth followed them. Will I see you again? Gareth asked. Sure, it's a long night, Evan replied casually, turning to Angie. You all right? Is it all right if I cut in? It's just, he looked so smug. But maybe you wanted to? No, don't even think about it. You just saved my life, in every way. Actually, I don't feel so good, Angie said, feeling a wave of nausea. We'll fix that in a minute. How about some fresh air? Lemonade? It's delicious, by the way, Evan said, fussing over her. Angie found herself in unfamiliar territory. A stranger was now taking care of her, and it felt strange yet comforting. Evan's kindness was a welcome change from Gareth's unpredictable mood swings, perpetual discontent, and nagging. With Gareth, Angie always felt like she was walking on a tightrope between ecstasy and an abyss. One moment, she was soaring on the wings of love, and the next, she was plummeting into the depths of despair. Gareth was beautiful but fickle, and Angie needed him like she needed oxygen. He always called her my love, but he never really declared his love. That was the paradox of their relationship. He was the only one who made her feel so alive and yet so lost. Gareth's unpredictable behavior could make her so happy she couldn't recognize herself. His dizzying surprises, spontaneous trips, and unexpected arrivals in the middle of the night were both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Driving at breakneck speeds and engaging in extreme hobbies were things she would never do with anyone else. But with him, it wasn't scary at all. Evan noticed her giggle and smiled at her. What's so funny? He asked. It's just that Gareth is so predictable. He always gets possessive when he sees me with someone else, Angie replied. He's not going to ruin our fun, Evan said with a determined look in his eye as he twirled her around on the dance floor. Angie felt safe in Evan's arms and didn't want the night to end. As they danced, she realized that she didn't want to think about Gareth anymore. She wanted to enjoy this moment with Evan and forget about all the complications that came with her ex-boyfriend. As Evan twirled Angie around the dance floor, she couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. What are we doing? She squinted at him with a smile. We're just having fun. Isn't that why we came here? He replied, looking at her with a serious expression. Despite his words, Angie could tell that Avon was still preoccupied with Gareth's jealousy. Suddenly, Angie noticed that Gareth was watching her intently, ignoring his current companion. He locked eyes with Angie as she continued to dance with Evan, unable to look away. Just then, Sandra appeared out of nowhere, breaking the momentary trance. I see you're not bored, Angie, she said with a smile. Angie was once again laughing at some joke of Evan's. Oh, Sandra, where have you been? You promised you'd be there for me. You seem to be doing fine without me. This is Evan, smiled Angie, and this is my friend Sandra, who, by the way, dumped me. And for that will take me to coffee and croissants tomorrow. On the house. Yes, I'd love to. Well, I'll leave you to it. If you need me, look for me on the dance floor. You're not interrupting, wanted to say to Angie, but Sandra was already gone. The awkwardness crept back in, and Angie longed for the comfort of her friend's presence. She appreciated Evan's assistance, but she wasn't sure where things could go from here. It seemed like a good time to bring their interaction to a close. "Would you like to grab coffee?" Evan asked with a smile. "I see you're busy tomorrow. How about I ask you out the day after tomorrow?" Angie was taken aback and could only muster a confused response. "Well, if coffee is too much, we could have tea instead, go to the movies, take a stroll and grab some ice cream, or even go for a boat ride," Evan offered, trying to make it easier for her to decide. "What do you think?" As she looked at Evan's naive, kind smile and mischievous curls, she couldn't help but feel sorry for him. He had such clear, genuine eyes, yet her heart remained unmoved. Guys like Evan were every girl's dream, the kind that would make excellent husbands and fathers. Lately, she had been contemplating moving on, about how Gareth wouldn't make a good family man. But the thought kept nagging her. What if he could have been? She would have been the happiest bride in the world. With someone like Gareth, anyone would feel like a queen. However, she knew it was all just a fantasy, one she couldn't let go of. She wasn't a girl anymore, and she struggled to figure out how to live her life. She didn't want to settle for the right man, like her older sister had done. Angie's excessive emotionality and thirst for love had always made her sister's choices seem incomprehensible to her. Perhaps that was why they hardly ever talked to each other. "Angie, you're nothing but trouble," her sister teased, waving her off. Suddenly, Angie found herself agreeing to go for a walk with Evan, but she couldn't help but wonder why she had pushed him. She didn't want to offend such a nice guy, but it seemed to be a done deal. Evan was thrilled at the prospect, his whole face glowing with excitement. Now it was too late to back out. "Great, how about 6 o'clock?" he asked impatiently. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As they sat in the park, enjoying their ice cream and laughing, Angie couldn't help but wonder, what am I doing here? Although Evan was charming and made her laugh, it didn't change the fact that her mind kept drifting back to Gareth. She knew she had to end this date soon. She wasn't ready for anything more, and Evan wasn't the one for her. As they strolled down the alley, Evan discreetly took her hand. His touch was warm and pleasant, something Angie had been longing for. But then she felt someone's eyes on her, and her intuition confirmed her suspicions. Turning around, she saw Gareth standing a little away, with his current fling next to an electric scooter rental. Andrew was always fascinated by the latest gadgets and speed, never really enjoying leisurely walks. Evan followed her gaze, noticing Gareth's presence as well. "Ah, our old friend," he joked, though his voice betrayed a hint of tension. Gareth abandoned his thoughts of the attractive person he was with and strode over to them, his steps quick and springy. His hair was still damp from the shower. Angie couldn't help but fixate on him. Why was she reacting this way to him? "Hello," he said, his gaze fixed solely on her, ignoring Evan. "It's been a while," Angie said, chuckling nervously. Gareth remained silent, running a hand through his hair before letting out a sigh. "Angie, I just wanted to come over and say hello. How have you been?" "I'm good. Do you remember Evan?" "Of course, you both were at Dylan's together," Gareth grimaced, throwing an annoyed look at Evan. "Shall we go?" Evan shifted his gaze from Angie to Gareth, the two of them seemingly frozen in place. He gave her a disdainful look before turning back to Angie. "Yes, let's go. Goodbye, Angie." "Darling, are you coming?" The girl's soft voice broke the eerie silence as she approached him, placing her hands on his shoulders. He shot her a contemptuous glance, then turned his gaze back to Angie. "Sure, let's go. Goodbye, Angie." "He's so strange," Evan said, looking anxiously at Angie as soon as Gareth and his girlfriend walked away. "That's just how he is. You can never really tell what he's thinking," Angie replied. "I can't believe you lasted a year in a relationship with him," Evan exclaimed, stretching his head in surprise. If only he knew. If only he knew. Angie could have stayed with Gareth for a year, 2 years, or even 1,000 years more. But she didn't need to see him again. It would only hurt more, 1,000 times more painful. Evan, I think I'd better go. You don't need a ride. I'll call a cab. Angie felt overwhelmed. The date had been cut short by Gareth's unexpected arrival, leaving her longing to wrap herself in a blanket and be alone. As her phone beeped, she ignored it and pulled the blanket tighter around herself. All she wanted was to be alone for the first time in a year. She quickly sent a text to her mother, informing her that she would be staying at her place tonight, anticipating a barrage of questions. However, she was in no mood to answer them just yet. Angie felt sick, but not from an illness. It was Gareth. Her fragile world had shattered overnight, and she regretted going to the party and seeing him again. As the phone continued to buzz with messages and calls, likely from her mother or Sandra, Angie turned it off without even glancing at the screen. Tomorrow, she would deal with everything. But for now, she just wanted to be alone and escape the memories that flooded her mind like a movie reel. Their breakup had been awkward, with him leaving abruptly due to depression and a desire to escape the town and find himself. He had promised to return in a month or two, but now it seemed like a distant dream. Naturally, his request for leave had been denied at work. Despite his good standing, he had argued with his boss and left in a huff, slamming the door behind him. He had come to tell her the news. He was leaving, and nobody knew where or for how long. Angie realized with dread that she was no longer part of his plans. And so he had left, leaving her in the dark about his whereabouts for the past year. Their mutual friends had been tactfully silent, avoiding the topic of Gareth and his life. But now, it was time for Angie to find out what he had been up to. With trembling hands, she opened her laptop and navigated to his social media profile. She scrolled through a plethora of photos, comments, and likes, noting that he had a busy social life with many friends. His recent posts were mostly pictures of him with friends or indulging in his hobbies. He had posted a photo of himself on a rock-climbing wall with the caption, "Climbing Everest again." In another post, he had a focused expression while driving his expensive car, as if squeezing out every ounce of speed. And in a third post, he was wearing a tracksuit with a bandage on his head, wiping himself with a towel after completing a marathon. His caption read, "First, was it ever any other way?" As she stared at his pictures for what seemed like an eternity, the doorbell rang, jolting her out of her reverie. She realized that she had lost track of time, and it was now completely dark outside. She wondered if her mother had finally arrived. Angie stood frozen in shock as she opened the door to find Gareth standing in front of her. Had she been hallucinating, or was it really him? "I couldn't get through. I thought you'd changed your number. Will you let me in?" he said, his voice hesitant. Silently, Angie stepped aside to let him in. She must have looked a mess with her disheveled hair and inflamed eyes, but how could she have known that he was coming? That was the thing about Gareth. He was always full of surprises. He sank into a chair with exhaustion and removed his sunglasses, revealing flushed eyes and pale, parchment-like skin. Angie couldn't help but notice how much he had changed since they last saw each other in the park. "Sleeplessness again?" Angie asked, surprised to see Gareth in front of her. She wondered if she was hallucinating. Gareth explained that he couldn't get through to her and had thought she changed her number. He then asked if she could let him in, and Angie stepped aside without a word. Gareth collapsed tiredly onto a chair and took off his sunglasses, revealing flushed eyes and pale, parched skin. Angie asked if he was suffering from sleeplessness again, and Gareth admitted he hadn't slept much since the party at Dylan's. He had been having trouble sleeping, and the sleeping pills didn't work. He then looked at Angie with a long look, and she turned away as he said, "Angie, I feel bad without you. Very bad." Angie couldn't help but feel the pain in her voice as she asked Gareth about his trip and the new girl he was with. But Gareth was back, and they needed to set things straight, no matter how difficult it was. Gareth explained that he had been backpacking with cheap hostels and lodges to sleep in. He needed to get away and clear his head. He got his old job back and had no problem getting reinstated. He then looked at Angie with pleading eyes and said, "Things are different now. I got you confused, but I know what I want now. I want you, Angie." He gazed at her with a self-satisfied grin on his face. "Truth be told, half of the clients abandoned the company after I left. I know how to deal with people, and that's valuable. So I'm determined to make things right. I've changed, you'll see. I want to work hard, have a fulfilling life, start a family, and I realize that I need you. Only you. The moment I saw you again, I understood that all those other women I was with were worthless. That girl, she's out of the picture. I told her that today. She doesn't mean anything and never did. Angie, my love, I want us back. Please, Angie?" As he touched her hand, she flinched away as though shocked. "Go away," she muttered. Gareth's gaze flickered to the laptop screen, which Angie had forgotten to close. There he was, in a picture from the car. "You do care," he said, smiling wryly as he stepped closer. "You care about me." Reaching out, he ran a hand through her hair and lifted her face by the chin. But she stubbornly averted her eyes, staring at the floor. "Look at me," he urged. Still, Angie refused to meet his gaze. "I said, look at me," he repeated, more forcefully this time. "How long do you think you can hide? He won't let you go so easily," she was warned. Despite her fear, she forced herself to meet his gaze, and once again, she was pulled under by those bottomless eyes. The world around her faded, leaving only his breath, his eyes, his lips. "It doesn't mean anything," he whispered incoherently as he covered her face with kisses. "It doesn't mean anything at all. We were so good together. Forgive me and forget." As he continued to shower her with kisses, she felt life return to her once again. "Sandra, please, let's not be hysterical," Angie urged her friend, knowing how easily she could become emotional. "You scare me, Angie. I'm not being hysterical," Sandra replied, surprised. "I know you're not, but I need to tell you something you won't like," Angie said, bracing herself. "Don't be so serious, darling." "Did something happen?" Sandra asked, trying to lighten the mood. Gareth slept over last night. We're back together," Angie revealed, nervously smiling. "Angie, are you out of your mind?" Sandra exclaimed, causing heads to turn in their direction. "I told you not to get hysterical," Angie reminded her friend. "But how am I supposed to respond to that? He did this to you," Sandra argued. "What did he do, Sandra?" "Yes, he was ill. He went away. He said he just wanted to keep me away from it all. Andre was depressed. He needed to sort himself out," Angie explained. "For as long as I can remember, he's been sorting himself out, and he can't seem to. And then what? Then what? If he's depressed, why doesn't he get treatment? Let him be treated. But he doesn't do anything but drive his car around like a lunatic. And he's dragging you back into it," Sandra exclaimed, her frustration boiling over. "Things will be different now. He wants a family." Angie trailed off, hoping her friend would understand. "Who, Gareth? Family? Do you really believe that?" Sandra scoffed. "How else can I explain it to you, Angie? You have to put the past behind you. Haven't you suffered enough? All right, let me use a proverb. You don't jump in the same river twice, and all that sort of thing. Do you understand?" "It's going to be different now," Angie repeated stubbornly. "Angie, really, don't be silly. Listen to me. You're just an addict enslaved by this Gareth. Anyway, how much longer can you drag it out?" Sandra continued, her concern evident. "I know a psychologist who specializes in cases like yours. Go see her. Talk to her, just once." "Am I sick, Sandra?" Angie asked, hurt. "We just want a fresh start. I don't need a cure." Sandra slammed the table in frustration. "What's the matter with you? You're not listening to me at all. I mean, he's going to bail or something, and then you won't be able to pick yourself up at all. Evan is such a great guy and..." Sandra paused. Evan, so you knew him? Angie asked. Okay, now I don't have to. Yes, I did. He works with Dylan. We were at a get-together once where you refused to come again. We talked about you and how we can help you. Well, one thing led to another. He looked at your photos and liked you a lot. Naturally, we knew that you would never want to meet him, so we set up your meeting. That's how it happened. Angie asked sarcastically. You were sitting there, discussing me with a stranger, setting me up without my knowledge. Thank you, my dear friends Dorothy and Dylan. Oh, and Evan too. Why don't you give him a try since he's such a great guy? Angie picked up her bag and stormed out of the coffee shop. Sandra slammed the table in frustration. What's the matter with you? You can't hear me at all. I mean, he'll run away again or something, and then you won't be able to pick yourself up at all. I mean, Evan is such a great guy and… Sandra paused. Evan? So you knew him? Okay, now, I don't have to. Yes, I did. He works with Dylan. We were at a get-together once, where you refused to come again. We talked about you, that we don't see you at all, how we can help you. Well, one thing led to another. He looked at your photos. He liked you a lot. Naturally, we knew that you would never want to meet him. So we set up your meeting. Ah, that's how. You were sitting there, discussing me with a stranger. They set me up without my knowledge. Thank you, my dear friends Dorothy and Dylan. Oh, and Evan too. Why don't you give him a try, since he's such a great guy? Angie picked up her bag and stormed out of the coffee shop. Everyone had been wrong. For the past month, things had been going great between Angie and Gareth. He seemed to have truly changed and was making plans for their future together. My love, he said, playing with her hair and taking in the sweet aroma from the kitchen. Smells so good. Are you baking something again? Apple pie. My mother gave me a whole bag of strawberries, she replied. Great. Let's hurry up with the tea then. You know, I've always dreamed of coming home to the smell of baked goods, he sighed. Only my mother never cooked. Well, we'll have it just like you dreamed. I love baking, she said with a smile. And I love tasting your masterpieces, he said, tenderly kissing her on the cheek and leading her into the kitchen. Angie had planned a special dinner for the weekend, complete with a homemade lemon muffin. She carefully sorted through the lemons when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Evan approached Angie, who was carefully selecting lemons for her special dinner. Angie, hi, he said. Angie was surprised to see him. Oh, Evan, unexpectedly, she replied. We had a weird breakup the other day. I know you're fine with your… Evan trailed off. Gareth, Angie filled in. That's right, I'm happy for you. Sandra told me everything. Well, that you're aware of our fake encounter. This whole thing was a mistake. We shouldn't have started our relationship with this sham, Evan apologized. It's okay, Evan, it really is. Now I have to go, Angie said, gathering her things. Of course, I've got your number if you need me. Anyway, I'll be in touch if you need me. Just as a friend, no big deal. And I'm sorry again, I'm still embarrassed, Evan said, offering his number to her. Angie arrived home and turned on the light, only to be startled by Gareth sitting in complete darkness in the room. Gareth, are you there? I thought you were coming later, she said. I'm here now, he snapped back. He stood up and kicked the grocery bag with his foot. Are you going to bake pies and play the caring wife again? I'm sick of it. I'm so sick of it. Angie was taken aback. Gareth, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? Can't you see? He exclaimed. I can't breathe in here. I have insomnia again. You don't even notice that I haven't slept in 3 days. My head is pounding. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I thought it was okay, she replied softly. You're so sensitive. You can't see anything under your nose. It's not okay. Nothing. I'm tired of all this, Gareth continued. Tired of what? Angie asked, trying to understand. Of your cakes and romantic dinners, of this stupid office job, of these days that are just like any other. I'm sick of it, he said, frustration evident in his voice. Angie tried to find a solution. What can I do for you? It's life, just life. Life? What the hell do I need a life like that for? You're crushing me with this married life of yours. It's like I've been married for 20 years. Doilies, cakes, grocery shopping together. Gareth trailed off, his voice filled with bitterness. Angie remained silent, feeling the weight of Gareth's words. I thought we were good. I thought you were happy, she repeated to herself. Gareth's announcement caught her off guard. I'm not staying tonight. I'm going back to my place. I need to be alone. Angie felt a lump form in her throat. Okay, she managed to whisper, looking down at the floor. Gareth grabbed his bag and walked towards the door. As he opened it, he turned around to look at Angie. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, and then he was gone. Angie stood in the living room for what felt like hours, staring at the empty doorway. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything was falling apart. Angie collapsed exhaustedly onto the couch. She couldn't believe that everything had fallen apart so quickly. Was she really going to have to start all over again? Angie wearily slumped onto the couch, her mind consumed with thoughts of Gareth. He never called the next day, leaving her feeling drained and exhausted. By evening, she couldn't take it anymore and dialed his number herself, only to find that his phone was off. She longed to talk to someone, but didn't want to hear the "we told you so's" from her friends, who were against her reunion with Gareth. She knew they were right, and it was her own fault for ignoring their warnings. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she noticed an unhealthy flush on her pale cheeks. She felt sick of Gareth and this toxic relationship. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Was it Gareth? She checked her watch. It was already 10 p.m., his style. But when she opened the door, she was surprised to see someone she never expected to see. Sandra's unexpected appearance at Angie's doorstep surprised her, as they hadn't seen each other since the day she got back with Gareth. Hi Sandra, what brings you here? Angie asked, trying to hide her surprise. I know things have been rough between us, and you might still be upset with me, but you have to see this. You just have to see it, Sandra said, sounding urgent. Sandra held out her phone to Angie, showing her a video. Who's that? Asked Angie. Gareth? Yes, that's him, replied Sandra. The video was blurry, with other dancers surrounding them, but there was no mistaking it was Gareth. He wasn't alone. A girl was hanging on to him, the same girl with long hair halfway down her waist. She was laughing, and he hugged her tighter, then started kissing her. It's what? Asked Angie, shocked. It's Angie's Gareth, said Sandra. In real time, right now, at the club. I just came from there. Thought you should see this. Angie silently threw on her jacket. Where are you going? Sandra asked. To the club. I want to look him in the eye. Why? Haven't you had enough? Sandra pleaded. I just want to look into his shameless eyes, Angie shouted, grabbing her keys and rushing down the stairs. The club was packed with people, but Angie spotted him immediately. He was with her, still laughing, dancing, and kissing. Ignoring the disapproving remarks, Angie started to push through the crowd. Hi, she said, meeting his gaze without saying a word. At first, he appeared bewildered, but then he grabbed her arm harshly. What are you doing here? Are you following me? Gareth, why? Just tell me why you did this to me. Who asked you to come back to me? You're like a little puppy, willing to do anything for me. I'm so tired of that pathetic, obedient look on your face. If you don't understand, let me show you. He forcefully pulled Angie through the crowd, with Sandra following closely behind. Despite the other clubgoers' disapproving exclamations, Gareth seemed determined to get away with his actions. Once outside, Angie tried to plead with him. Gareth, please let me go. This isn't right. But he ignored her and pushed her into his car, turning on the engine and driving away at a reckless speed. Sandra watched them go, feeling helpless and worried for her friend's safety. It hurts, Gareth. Let me go, prayed Angie. In the car, he pushed her into the front seat and turned on the ignition. They drove away at breakneck speed. Gareth was silent and only pressed down harder on the gas pedal. Gareth, please stop, Let me out. You loved me so much, didn't you? Didn't you? Can you handle it all? Can you handle it all? You said we were happy that whole year. Well, then you're either foolish or you've forgotten everything. I didn't just walk all over you, and I've been with other girls the entire time, and you don't even care. Gareth, my love, you've been coddling me. I bet you were even planning to marry me, weren't you? Huh? Isn't that right? Tell me, isn't it? Angie's tears streamed down her face as she sat in the passenger seat, her heart heavy with despair. I'm so sick of those puppy dog eyes of yours. But since you love me so much, shall we stay together forever? Eh, how's that? Gareth laughed maniacally as he swerved the car into the oncoming traffic. Angie screamed for him to stop, but he ignored her and continued to drive recklessly. The headlights of an approaching car grew closer and closer, and Angie knew they were about to crash. As she looked at Gareth, it suddenly dawned on her that he was a monster. He was willing to risk their lives and the lives of innocent people on the road just to prove a point. This was not love, it was madness. She realized that if they survived this, she needed to get as far away from him as possible. Gareth jerked the steering wheel just in time, causing the car to swerve off the road and come to a sudden halt as he slammed on the brakes. Angie discreetly glanced at the other women sitting next to her. Did she really look like that? The distraught expression, the lackluster hair, the twitchy movements. Well, she was just like them, and it was time to accept it. Here, they were all equal. A beautiful woman sank into the chair around which their chairs were arranged. She smiled warmly and studied each of them attentively. All right, I believe we should begin. I'm delighted to have all of you here. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. After each workout, Angie felt a refreshing sense of lightness. As her coach had advised, sports were the perfect cure for boredom. You come here every night? Asked Sandra, surprised, wiping her wet hair with a towel. Well, except for those nights I go out with you. Those days are my night off, Angie replied with a smile. Sandra looked like she wanted to say something else, but hesitated. Angie, do you know that Gareth is back in town? Yes, I know, Angie replied flatly. In fact, I've even seen him. Oh my God, exclaimed Sandra and sat down on the bench. Relax, Sandra, Angie said, taking her friend's hands. It's all in the past now. I'm not going back to him. But then why did you go out with him? We didn't meet. We ran into each other at the mall. You know, our town is like a big village. And, Sandra prompted, and he suggested we go out and talk. He asked for my new number and to unblock him on social media. But I just told him not to come near me again. Never again, Angie said firmly. Her hands no longer shook, her legs no longer buckled. I'm cured. I remember everything, my friend. I guess I had to be on the edge to know everything about that man. And I never said thank you for being there for me the whole time. For the therapist, I couldn't have done it alone. And the other girls in the group. We still talk to each other, support each other. It's been a long road. I'm so happy for you. Sandra hugged Angie impetuously. By the way, since it's a new life and all, Carol is still asking about you. I know, we correspond sometimes, and maybe someday we'll have something, but not now, not yet, Angie said with a smile. They picked up their gym bags and, talking quietly, headed for the exit.